however you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. So for everyone who was super excited, including myself, to hear from Reuben FastHorse. Unfortunately, Reuben had a medical emergency today. So I wish him well in his health and wellness, but unfortunately he can't be with us tonight. I will keep you updated on his status as I learn more, but please send him positive healing and loving vibes. He could really use it right now. So in lieu of that, again, I'm sorry for everyone who tuned in, for Reuben, but I do have another guest coming in for the first hour, and that's Ray Hernandez of Free, and he'll be joining us to discuss consciousness, paranormal, and the ufological enigma. And so until Ray jumps in here, because this was rather last minute, I'll just give you a couple of updates and reminders that if you would like to support Paranormal Now or Coffee and UFOs podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon, and I put the link down below. I put my heart and soul into this. I love it. I will always do it, but every little bit of support helps. So thank you for your consideration there. And in the second hour, we still have Christina Gomez, as that was a pre-recorded interview I did with Christina earlier this week. So stay tuned for that second hour, or come back and pop back in for that interview. If you are an obsessive coffee drinker like myself, remember we have a 20% discount for Alien Coffee Bean Coffee. And that is a 20% discount code if you go to the website, Mystery20. All caps, Mystery20. Alien Coffee Bean brings kindness and coffee, and it's actually delicious. And I would never share something like this with you if I didn't actually believe it myself. I'm a coffee fanatic. I drink it, and I love it. So we'll get to Christina in a little bit, and I see the comments. Hi, Aaron. Hey, Angel. Thank you so much for joining. Johan, Kat. Hey, guys. So right now I'm going to have to improvise for a little bit until Ray jumps in here. So that could be a little bit. So something that comes up on the program a lot. Thanks, Kat. I appreciate that. Sending good vibes to Reuben. Yes, he could really use that. The consciousness and the ufological and paranormal phenomena is, while I'm not a scientist, I think it's very much a spiritual endeavor. Whether we have actual scientific data to support a connection between sentience, between one world and our world, we can't forget the actual subjective experience. We don't always have the evidence. We don't always have the data, the video, the EVPs of the recordings to prove that we had a particular experience. But if you have had an experience, that's yours, no matter what anyone else thinks of it. And so often, I think, is the case that those experiences turn out to be even the scariest ones, even if it's a cryptid encounter, which we'll hear more about on my next Coffee and UFOs episode, or UFO encounter. Even if you're scared in your boots in that moment, it always seems to stir something in the subconscious. Like we all have this underlying operating system that is drawn to not only what scares us, not only to what we don't know, but to the strange and the bizarre. And I have to say, most people in the paranormal world, listeners, researchers, hosts on shows like this, I think that there is an element of courage. Sometimes we get so accustomed to a particular field or interest of our own, and we kind of get accustomed to that. Whether if you're searching for UFOs in the skies or you're investigating alien abductions, if you suddenly have a apparition appear in front of you, or you are in a house and you get those cold chills, a sudden drop of temperature, and you get that odd sense that something is in the room, you may not exactly be prepared for it at that moment. I know that I'm not always prepared for the unexpected, even though we talk about it week after week after week on this program. Hey, JP, thanks for joining. Hey, Maria. So everyone who's just joining now, I want to let you know that Reuben FastHorse unfortunately had a medical emergency, and he won't be able to join us this hour, but we are waiting for Ray Hernandez to jump in any moment and talk consciousness and the paranormal. He's got a new work coming out, so I'm really excited about that. Also, any of you who are familiar with Paranormal Now know Dr. Bob Davis, who's been on here. And I really appreciate Dr. Bob Davis's approach. He's entirely scientific and yet with an open mind. So it's hard to even call him a skeptic because he's very kind and polite towards anything he has some serious doubt on, because he leaves that door open, which is what we do all the time here. We leave the door open. We leave the door open for you to come and listen or to share your stories if you like. And it's leaving the door open that allows possibilities for new and novel experiences. I never get bored talking about these subjects. I could do it day in and day out. And because each one of your experiences, the guests that we speak to, whether you're male, female, a different ethnicity, background, gender, whatever you are, you have your own niche, your own, idea of what it is that you're experiencing and how it affects you emotionally is just as important as all the piles of data in the world. Because what's the point of all the data if we don't deal with who we are and the experiences we're having? Because that's the exciting stuff. That's what's important at the end of the day. That's what helps us feel like better people, because we try to understand not only ourselves, but high strangeness. And now I am happy to welcome Ray Hernandez to Paranormal Now. Hey, Ray.
Hello. This is a quick little emergency here, so I hope I'm not too disheveled here.
Absolutely not, Ray. Thanks so much for jumping in. It's been a while since we chatted, and I think this is actually the first time we're doing a video chat.
I know it's been quite a while, maybe 2 years since last time we chatted.
Pretty close. Yeah. So how have you been?
Busy. We've been working. I've been working now for more than 5 years now on a second book, and it's 4 volumes. It's 4 huge volumes, and I've been busy with that. It's going to have over 150 separate authors, and we can discuss that as we move along.
Yes. So in your previous work, how many authors did you have?
The previous authors, we had 16 chapters. A couple of them were, we had co-authors for several of them. So maybe 20 overall, 20 different authors in the first book, Beyond UFOs.
So this is exponentially more intense.
Well, what it is, it's let me just explain to the audience members, just for those that have no idea what we're talking about. In 2013, I and 3 individuals, one was Apollo 14 astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. The other one was Harvard astrophysicist, Dr. Rudy Shields. And both of them were, when we started off, they were in their late 70s. And then we had Mary Rodwell from Australia. And she, for people who don't know who she is, you could equivocate her with like Kathleen Martin or Barbara Lamb or Yvonne Smith in Los Angeles. She's been working with UFO contactees and abductees for over 30 years. So the 4 of us got together and we started this organization, which eventually evolved to more than 20 individuals. Roughly half of them were PhDs. Most of them retired professors. And we named the organization the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. And then over a 5-year period, we had numerous retired academics that work with people like Kathleen Martin. We had Rosemary Allen Guiley. I don't know if you knew who she was. Barbara Lamb, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Mary Rodwell, Denise Stoner. Many people who have been working with UFO contact experiencers for many, many, many years. And both groups, the academics and the researchers, over a 9-month period, we developed a methodology, which was to undertake the world's first and only comprehensive academic research study on UFO contact experiencers. So it's never been done before. The most that we had was a survey that Kathleen Martin had done with Denise Stoner. That was only 50 questions. And they only had 50 experiencers, and all of them were abductees. So it was a very, very limited and tiny piece of the puzzle. There were other smaller statistical research studies, but we were the only game in town. And so what we did is we developed 3 huge surveys. 2 of them were quantitative, 1 was qualitative. And we administered that survey over a 3.5-year period. And then after that, we spent more than a year writing the data findings. So it was a total of 5 years. And we published this book titled Beyond UFOs. And that was the data from over 4,300 UFO contact experiencers from over 125 countries. So it was a massive project.
It was, and over the years, you've done an excellent job discussing that work and sharing it. So why the second work, and what should we expect from it?
Well, with the first work, first of all, very few people have actually read it, especially people talking about the UFO field.
Do you know how I read it, Ray? Because it's up on my bookshelf. Every once in a while, I open up a chapter, and I read a bit. I will admit I did not read start to finish all the way through, but that's what's great about it, because it's a plethora of information, and it's like an encyclopedia to a degree. And you can pick it up, you can use it as reference. Yeah.
But people that are not familiar with the work here, the book is actually 820 pages.
Right.
And what it is each of these chapters analyze a specific topic from our research survey. So it's not people's opinions. They're actually writing about what the data shows. And much of our data, for the vast majority of people who are totally unfamiliar with it, totally contradicts what's circulating in the UFO field. Okay. For example, if I were just to go over just quick 4 major findings, and then I could talk about the new book. One was that these experiences, in the very beginning, 37% viewed them as negative. Okay, so we're not saying this is all love and light, positive. These experiences, no. In the beginning, 37% of the people viewed them as negative, and but towards the end of the survey, what we found out was that only 4% viewed them as mainly negative, and we asked over 20 questions on that topic, because depending on you ask a question, you get a response, and so we asked it in 20 different ways. We even asked for the different types of beings. We had a whole array of different types of beings, and we asked people to rate their experience with their beings in terms of, highly positive, slightly positive, neutral, slightly negative, highly negative. And so also we found out was that only 1/3 of the people that took our surveys had an abduction. In order to take our survey, you had to, first of all, have seen a UFO. That's number one. Secondly, you have had to have some type of contact with a non-human intelligence. Okay. And the number one category of non-human intelligence that people interacted with was the energy being. It wasn't the short grays. The short grays wound up at number 3. And that's what a lot of folks in ufology are totally clueless about.
Can you clarify energy being? Because, a lot of images come into my head of all the various entities people describe. What do you mean by energy being?
Okay. Yeah. First of all, let me just backtrack a little bit and just say that people describe thousands of different types of beings. Okay. Thousands of them. And again, that gets to the hypotheses of our second book, that these experiences are virtual reality experiences, holographic projections. that they might not necessarily be all, real physical entities that we're interacting with. But the energy being is what I saw in my living room that totally healed our dog. That's one aspect of it. And let me describe it. It was like maybe 2.5 feet wide by about a foot in height. Pure energy, waving, multiple colors, semi-transparent. Okay, and so it was obviously pure energy. It wasn't a solid object. And this intelligence, I won't go into the details because it'll be too lengthy, basically was able to read my mind, put me to sleep. My wife disappeared in front of me and the dog disappeared. When an hour later, when I woke up, the dog was fully healed. And we were going to be euthanizing her later that afternoon because she was totally paralyzed. So we were going to bring her to the vet that afternoon to euthanize her. So anyway, that's a description of an energy being. Another description of an energy being, a lot of people describe that as all of a sudden the wall opens up and there's a portal, like a portal in the wall, and this vast array of energy, again, it's not something physical or solid, is like right there, and all of a sudden you're having telepathic communications with that object, with that intelligence. That's another way. Another way is people see these globs of different rays and lights that people are communicating with it. Okay, that's another form of energy being. Just like all the other categories.
Yeah, just to jump in here one real quick. There's a lot of controversy around what orbs are. What's your take after all your research so far on orbs as people report them?
Well, we asked about 20 questions on orbs. And what the vast majority of the people that took our surveys concluded was that this was a non-human intelligence, because sometimes the orb would all of a sudden materialize a being from the orb. For example, people have described a human-looking being that will materialize from an orb. Okay, people would describe a being that all of a sudden materialize into an orb. Okay, so for example, you're communicating telepathically with an energy being, and all of a sudden it shrinks into an orb, and then all of a sudden it'll go through a wall. Okay, and so there are many descriptions like that where it transforms.
When it shrinks, it's almost like it's going into the orb, like it's a capsule of some sort, and then the orb itself moves through the wall.
Yes, correct. It's like that. It's like the shell. When you see these beings, a lot of the experiencers were told by these beings that we could change to whatever form you're comfortable with, and also to whatever form we want. Okay, so this is not necessarily what I look like. Okay, just like in an out-of-body experience or in a near-death experience. Okay, it's you're dealing with all of these forms, and all of those forms are specially designed for you. Okay, based upon your experiences, your comfortness, etc. It's and so it's working with you. And so a lot of these beings can put on that exterior shell. Okay, and so it was that exterior shell before it actually disappears. Because a lot of orbs have been right there in front of you, and all of a sudden gets smaller and poof, disappears.
Right. I have to ask you: are you a fan of the Matrix movies series?
Well, not only am I a fan of it, we have the vast majority of the academic professors in our organization and a few of the medical doctors. Most of us, I would say the vast majority of them, I would say over 90%, hypothesize, first of all, that consciousness is primary and not our material reality. Number one. Number two, that all of what I term the contact modalities, and I used that word back in 2013 to describe all of the paranormal phenomenon, that it needs to be studied as one integrated phenomenon. So all of these academics believe that all of the paranormal is one. Why? Because consciousness is primary, and we're interacting. For example, well, let me continue. And so the last question of the what was your question again? I'm sorry, I got lost in there.
Well, it's a kind of a two-part question. One, are you a fan of the Matrix?
Yes, the Matrix, yes.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that most of us, not all of the group, I would say close to 90%, believe that we are inside a greater reality. Now, how you use that term is different usage of it. Edgar Mitchell described it as a quantum hologram. Okay, that
Lynn Taggart calls it the field.
Yeah. That it's the same thing. It's information fields, and
Gotcha.
Edgar described it via a quantum hologram. The same concept of the information fields. Other people describe it like Tom Campbell, and he wrote a chapter for our book that he describes it via a virtual reality hypothesis. Some of the philosophers in our group, and we have several PhD philosophy professors, they describe it in terms of philosophical terms. And I won't get into the philosophical terms that are used, but it's basically it's idealism.
Yeah.
Same concept, that we are inside a greater reality, that we are inside the mind of God. So the vast majority of our researchers believe that we are living in a reality which is not what actually is, okay, but we're perceiving it via our five senses. But in actuality, those five senses are an illusion because we're inside a greater reality.
Isn't there a difference between truth and reality?
Well, it depends how you define reality. If you're defining reality via your five cognitive senses, okay, the NDE phenomenon, the OBE phenomenon, remote viewing, the phenomenon of ghosts, perceived ghosts and spirits, and even the UFO contact phenomenon reveals that your experiences and consciousness fall way beyond your five senses, cognitive senses, because if you have a near-death experiences, okay, you're able to see and perceive your experiences, but your body's dead underneath you, okay? If you're having an out-of-body experiences, you hear, you even smell. For a lot of these OBE experiencers, you see your experiences. So you have perceived experiences via your cognitive abilities, but it's much, much different than the perceived 3D reality of the five cognitive senses.
Okay. When we see a picture of orbs, right? Because people share those pictures online or on shows. How do we know if it's lens flare or an orb? Is there a way that we're able to decipher that?
Well, here's my take on this, and it's a little bit complicated and not like a lot of people that you might have as guests, okay?
No, I love it. Go for it, Ray.
Okay, my take on it is that that these paranormal experiences, okay, need to be redefined and reinvestigated. For example, Jacques Vallée, right? He's always said, when people were asked him because he doesn't believe in the ET hypothesis, and numerous other people, including, for example, J. Allen Hynek, right before he died, the last few years before he died, he says, "Look, I'm now in my life believing that these experiences are consciousness-based experiences. Okay, that while we physically see, okay, objects, while we physically see, let's say, footprints on the ground, and so it makes it very, very real. When people see a Sasquatch, they see footprints of a Sasquatch. Okay,
sure.
But in reality, for a lot of the people that have had Sasquatch experiences, okay, many of them believe that these are interdimensional beings. That yes, they are physical, but they're also non-physical. And that was the conclusion that Allen Hynek came in, Jacques Vallée came in. And when Vallée was asked, they said, "Do you think that these are beings from another dimension?" And Vallée always responded, he says, "We just do not understand what is space-time." Okay, so that's a very polite way of saying that, yes, I don't believe in the ET hypothesis that they come from a physical planet somewhere else, that these are, interdimensional, for lack of a better usage, but that's a phrase, multidimensional type of experiences that are consciousness-based.
Yes, and earlier when I knew that you were going to step in last minute, again, thank you for that. I was talking about that consciousness experience, and it's also an emotional experience as well, and we don't talk about that enough, I don't think. But why?
Well, I went through a period of drinking for like a week because it was like nonstop paranormal experiences. So, and my experiences were all positive that I had,
but intense. Yeah.
But intense. I mean, when you're being shown topics of reincarnation, topics of the afterlife, okay, when you're being shown missions here on Earth, okay, that you already came in with certain objectives, and via your paranormal experiences, you're being shown these things. And then, you freak out because you never thought about reincarnation before. You never thought about the afterlife before. And all of a sudden, this intelligence that we're interacting with is taking you to another reality, to a matrix reality, where you're actually being shown and taught these things. So part of you thinks that you're going crazy, okay? And to numb it, people use drugs, they begin to drink, they get divorced, So it's all part of the cycle. Most of the major contact experiences that you speak to them have gone through that, but many years later, most of them have managed to ground themselves. There's still a small few, like I told you, about 4% of the people that's still highly traumatized by these experiences. But most of the people that we discovered were individuals that only had a few experiences. But the people that had the vast majority have continued experiences throughout the years. Like, for example, I could talk about Kathy Martin, who's part of the Free Organization. In the beginning, she was a pure abduction researcher.
Exactly. Race, Ray, hold it there just for a quick moment. I saw Race Hobbs pop in on YouTube. I just want to give a shout out to Race. Race saved the day by getting in touch with you. Thank you both. And this is a perfect interlude to share with everyone that Ray Hernandez will be having his own show on the unxnetwork.com. On the X, the new mainstream. Ray, do you have a name for your show yet?
Yes, Consciousness and Contact.
That's perfect. I'm so excited. So everybody keep your eye out for that on the unxnetwork.com. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Ray.
So there's numerous people. I would say most of the major people that Bud Hopkins wrote a book about, okay, these people started off as frightened abductees. Now, almost all of them, they don't call themselves abductees. They call themselves contactees, okay? They're all love and light, okay? Whitley Strieber, okay, talked about being, having anal rape, being raped, and his horrible traumatic experiences. Now, the man in his recent interviews is saying that every day doesn't go by where he gives thanks to these beings, to his visitors, which he calls them, because they gave him spirituality. They totally transformed him into a totally different human being. So he's Mr. Love and Light now.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. And I do not mean to draw a direct parallel, but, in religious circles, right, angels or God or a goddess can intercede and intervene in our lives at will for a reason or a purpose of which we do not understand. But then when we have experiences with these entities or aliens, whatever, the question that's begged is, well, if they can just come in here and do these things, why not come in here and really help us out? What's with the guerrilla warfare, just popping in, intense experience, popping out. And then why not really just make a difference and really help the humans? Because my guess would be that the vast majority of humans would be like, please help us make this a peaceful planet. Can we make things better? So why doesn't that happen? And do you think that it's wrong for people to think in those terms, to have expectations of aliens saving the human race?
Okay, first of all, Alan, I don't use that word aliens and I don't use the word ETs because I don't believe in them. Okay, they're very physical, people interacting with them, but I think it's a little bit more complicated. Okay,
well, can we say alien mind or consciousness?
Well, I prefer non-human intelligence because that is a very broad range. Okay, like I said before, the number one type of being that people interacting with were the energy beings. Okay, number two category was the human-looking beings. Okay, and that was very, very broad scope. There's human-looking beings that you name it, colors, sizes, shapes, forms. People described it. Okay, so in terms of these beings, okay, I think this topic of beings and ETs and aliens that you referenced to
Mhm.
helping us, I think it has to be looked upon via the near-death experience phenomenon. Okay, the
Okay.
NDE phenomenon is rarely introduced into, for example, this radio station in terms of the topic of the paranormal, the topic of ufology. Okay, why? Because people have been seeing the different contact modalities as separate and distinct. Okay, there's the UFO box. Okay, we're not going to talk about the paranormal, with the UFO. For years, it was that way. Now we know, based on our data findings, totally
Mhm.
contradicts that, blows it up. One of our data findings is that the vast majority of these experiences are actually paranormal. They're not physical experiences. You're seeing a UFO, you're seeing a physical being, but 90% of your experiences are paranormal experiences. That's what our data set shows. Okay, so the field of near-death experiences, they don't normally view UFOs connected to this, or even
Mhm.
out-of-body experiences. They don't see it connected to NDEs because the out-of-body, the astral travels, is like a different phenomenon. So
Mhm.
everyone is putting their own arena in a separate box. Okay, and so the academics, and we're talking major people, and I'll go over some of them now. Very well-known people.
Mhm.
John Alexander is a classic example. This is a man that is well known in the ufology field, but yet he and George Knapp, okay, they both argue that consciousness is primary, not our physical 3D reality. They also have argued, at least in my interviews, that all of the paranormal is one integrated phenomenon. Okay, Dean Radin, okay, the lead scientist at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, says the
Mhm.
same exact thing. Jeffrey Mishloff, he just won the Bob Bigelow Award, okay, for the best essay on the afterlife. I don't know if you heard about that award. They gave away $1.5 million. Okay,
Oh, yes.
all right. So,
Mhm.
and I could go on and on and on. All the people that have written chapters for our book is people at that level. We have four professors in medical schools. These are psychiatrists, medical doctors. They all believe the same thing. Okay, and so when I think the way to be able to look at all of this is through the lens of a near-death experiencer. Okay, if you have a near-death experience, you immediately realize that our reality is not the true reality. That there's something more profound behind it. Okay, many of these individuals learn about reincarnation. They learn about the spirit world. They learn about our missions here on Earth. Okay, and so we're here to basically learn lessons. And what Raymond Moody has told me, what Kenneth Ring has told me, what Jeffrey Long, who's one of the co-editors of our book, he's one of the leading NDE researchers. He's published 2 books on NDEs. Has a huge database via surveys of both NDE and OBE experiencers. And all of them say that, Dr. Bruce Grayson, that the most important lesson that we're here to learn in our earthly plane, okay, and which is the most difficult lesson, okay, by far the most difficult lesson, is to learn how to love. Okay, and Raymond Moody told me that. He said, Ray, what we discovered is that the most important lessons, that when people are asked to return, look, you can't stay here, you got to go back. And they're told it's not how much, it's not what religion you are, it's not how much money you have, it's not how famous you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is that you need to learn how to love. But Raymond Moody told me a day doesn't go by where I don't feel like strangling somebody. Okay. And what he meant by that, and we clarified it later on. He says, "Look, Ray, it's the most simplest lesson, that people are asked to do
Yeah.
once they return, but it's the most difficult lesson."
You know,
Okay.
it's so funny that you say this, Ray, because I think many of us, we end up going on these, philosophical endeavors, and we're banging up our head against the wall. We're reading books, on philosophy and theology, and trying to crack this nut. And I, honest to God, I think that you're right. That the core of all this, whatever love is with the capital L, that's it, man. Like Bob Marley got it right, and Jesus, the Buddha, got it right.
The principal teaching of Jesus and Buddha is love, and that's the main message. When you have an NDE and you go into the light, what does everyone describe? Everyone, the immense love, and they always describe it. I have children, and this is like a million times more bigger, multiplied. The love for my children, the love that I've received, everyone describes the same thing. One other aspect, which is very important for your listeners, is that all of the UFO contact experiences that people had, okay, we're talking about 4,350 total, okay, that took our surveys in the English language. We also did it in various languages, okay? Each of these experiences were very unique to them, okay? No one can even compare my experiences to someone else because it was so unique to me, okay? And you name the person, each of them has had very, very unique experiences to them. You talk to NDE experiencers, they'll tell you the same thing, okay? Very, very unique experiences. Not two people have the same exact experience. Out-of-body experiencers, the same thing, okay? But yet, there are commonalities to each of it. For example, for NDE experiencers, there's something called the Grayson scale, which are commonalities that you can rank them. The more of those numbers that you check off on the Grayson scale, the more you have can demonstrate that this was a real NDE. Same thing with UFO contact, okay? There's numerous commonalities associated with it. Same thing with OBEs, okay? But that's something which is so fascinating because what's happening with each of these phenomena, okay, is that we are interacting with the mind of God. Okay? We are interacting with the mind of God. And these experiences are uniquely tailored to us. For example, each of these experiences involves a manipulation of space-time, okay? NDE, right? Manipulation of space-time. OBE, manipulation of space-time. Remote viewing, manipulation of space-time, okay? Ghosts and spirits, manipulation of space-time, okay? In our surveys, that was one of the major findings, that the UFO contact phenomena involves a manipulation of space-time. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of Jacques Vallée, who's written 20 books on this phenomenon. But our data sets, for example, 50% of the people that took our survey were brought to other realities, other matrix realities.
Sure.
Like in my case.
Right. Well, here's the thing is earlier you mentioned a lot of researchers, scientists, yourself perhaps, think that this is all these paranormal, happenings are part of the same phenomena. On the one hand, I appreciate what you're doing and the message you're sending because the name of this show is Paranormal Now.
Well, let me clarify that. I didn't say, what I didn't mean to say is that all these experiences fall into one little tiny box. Each of these are separate and distinct phenomena, but they have to be studied as one.
Okay,
there's a difference there. But yes, because each of them has commonalities.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So that's where I was going.
Yeah.
Because the analogy that I look at it is like, as a biologist, you can study aspects of nature, right? And there are certain instruments we use just to view nature. Time lapsing. We use cameras to video octopus in the sea or monkeys in the tree. We have infrared that we use, night vision. So all these things to kind of get into worlds that we don't normally see as humans. But that's just nature, right? It's not like some crazy out there phenomena. And I wonder if this phenomena, whatever that we speak of in a general term like this, or phenomenon plural, are they a part of something that connects them all, or is this just another layer of reality, like here we are on Earth? There's all these different aspects of it, but it's not, a deer is a deer, an octopus is an octopus, but it's all part of nature. It's all part of biology. Is that kind of what you're saying, or?
What I'm saying is that our reality is not what we think it is. Okay, that our reality is much more. Our reality is much more complex. That we are inside a greater reality. Now, in terms of the specifics of that greater reality, the only information that we have is what experiencers of these diverse experiences are telling us. Okay. And also historically, what people have told us. For example, OBE experiencers. One of the things that I hope you have more OBE experiencer guests on your show. What they will tell you is that when they have these astral travel, let's say that's a better term for what I'm talking about now. Astral travels are people that go at a consciousness level into different hierarchies. Okay. The first hierarchy is very physically based, and it's grounded in our 3D reality. So you're seeing your body underneath. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You might be flying on the ground, like a friend of mine. He goes to Cuba. Okay. He just says, okay, I'm going to go visit my old town. And boom, he's on above the water, above Miami, going on the Caribbean. And he's there in a short while where he grew up in that village. And he sees all the campesinos, the agricultural workers, at 4:30 in the morning going out, taking care of their animals and things of that sort. And he's physically there. He's seeing it all there. So that's a very visual 3D reality. Other people that do major astral traveling will tell you that there's another reality. And a lot of it, they associate it with the different types of beings that they associate it with. Okay. And a lot of them will tell you that at the highest level are these non-physical beings that are anyway, I won't go into too much detail.
Well, let me get this question in, Ray, from Jan on YouTube. I would like to hear what Ray knows about physical similarities in the brain of experiencers, and also if there are any links to autistic personality traits among experiencers. Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, we had a retired professor of neuroscience in our group, Dr. Bob Davis. We had several advisors that were medical doctors. One was an advisor that graduated from Johns Hopkins University. She also was a neuroscientist at Harvard University, and she studied autism and consciousness, being able to have advanced telepathic communication, and to be able to crunch out numbers, very sophisticated numbers, and also to read minds. So there is that relationship in terms of ESP and in terms of reading minds with the autistic skill. But one of the items that we learned from Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's a medical doctor, who was one of the pioneers that really began the academic research on near-death experiences, and many of the other NDE researchers that are medical doctors, they all have demonstrated in numerous of their books, numerous of their lectures, writings, and studies that the NDE phenomenon has nothing to do with the brain. Because people are clinically dead. They might be under anesthesia, where there's no neural imaging at all if you put these sensors on your brain. But yet these people are having very, very conscious and vivid experiences in an NDE realm. The out-of-body realm is the same thing. You go out of your body, you see your body underneath. And then all of a sudden you say, okay, I want to see my mother. And then you're going into a higher realm. Remember, I talked about the different realms of the OBE experiences, and all of a sudden your mother appears to you in a physical form. And they say, oh, I wish we can go into that river that I used to play with my mother. And boom, they're in that river. They're throwing water on each other. The water doesn't stick to them like regular water because it's like an OBE type of reality. But that's a description that Preston Dennett wrote for our book. I don't know if you've heard of Preston Dennett.
Yeah, he's been on the show. And that reminds me of a movie called What Dreams May Come. That the heaven is kind of this place where your mind just creates reality around you.
Exactly. That's what an OBE is, and astral traveling is, where you are co-creating with the mind of God, with consciousness, these realities. Okay. And with an NDE, you could think of it the very same way, except what it is that they're creating what you're physically seeing, the environment that you're seeing, even though it's very, very different, but they're working with your consciousness, with your soul, with your spirit to make it amenable to you, for you to digest the phenomenon. Some people see their deceased parents right in front of them materialize and communicating with them. Some people have their dog that died, 20 years ago. Some people have very visual, very physical type of experiences. Other people gradually evolve through different types of experiences in NDE. My own father says that he was up there for 20 to 30 years in his NDE. So
that's phenomenal. Yeah. So just to clarify, because we're talking about these different realities, right?
Yes.
Are they separate realities, or are all these levels one reality? Are we a part of this one reality? Because before I was kind of confused on what you think reality actually is.
Well, there's only one reality, and that's the greater mind.
So then anything that you and I are experiencing, whether we are ignorant of the many multitudes of levels of existence, this is still reality, right?
It's still reality, but it's a reality according to your 5 3D senses, okay, cognitive senses. But once you have an out of body experiences, you realize, holy cow, my total sense of what I thought was reality is not correct. Or once you've had a near-death experiences, okay?
Like the idea of like the Toltecs clearing the fog, that the smoke.
Yeah, all the ancient mystical traditions had it. We're talking from the Vedic tradition, from the Buddhist tradition, to the Middle Eastern traditions, to the Greeks and Romans, you name it. Even the anthropological cultural traditions, from Africa and South America, they all talking about the same thing. About a greater reality.
Yeah, so I'm going back again, but I think this could be really helpful because of the amount of work that you've done. So oftentimes in the paranormal world, we have these conversations about a UFO, an alien abduction, a cryptid experience, a ghost, a poltergeist, right?
Let me just say that the vast majority of the experiencer chapters in our book, and I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, have had 3 or 4 of the contact modalities. Everything that you've mentioned, we have like half the people in our book that had those. Okay.
Right. And so many researchers, they say, oh, all of these things are part of the same, quote, same phenomena. And that's how we have to approach the study.
Yes,
so I'm asking you, how do you approach all of these things as one phenomena and not separately?
Okay. First of all, that's one of the objectives of our book. Let me transition towards what the book is all about. Okay.
Sure.
Our book is going to have 4 volumes. The first 2 volumes are chapters that are written by professors, academic professors, medical doctors. Half of those MDs are professors in medical schools. Okay. We have PhD philosophers. We have PhD neuroscientists, physicists, astrophysicists, sociologists, psychologists, and a couple of people who are non-PhDs that have written theoretical chapters. Okay, so that's roughly 1,000 pages, and then volumes 3 and 4 are chapters that are written by experiencers of the contact modalities. Now, let me define the contact modalities. The contact modalities are all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil of our reality and having contact with non-human intelligence. And we've been talking about them before, UAPs, NDEs, OBEs, remote viewing, ghosts and spirits, hallucinogenic journeys, etc., etc. Okay, those are just a few of them. Okay, and so what we have in volumes 3 and 4 are individuals that have had 3 or 4 or more of these contact modalities experiences. Let me give you an example, okay? And I could talk, you could use her name now because she's going to appear in our book. In a couple of months, it's going to be published. Dr. Melinda Greer. She is a medical doctor, a pediatrician. She's approximately my age. She's actually a little bit younger than I am. I think she's 63 or 64. This is a woman who extremely brilliant when you talk to her. She's had, and her husband is also a college graduate. He's a forest ranger. Okay, and she has seen 12 UFOs. Okay, roughly half of them were very large and like right in your face type of UFOs. Okay, about 3 or 4 of them were these huge triangle crafts that floated right above her twice with her husband, and they got to see the whole bottom of this craft. Okay, she's had 3 Sasquatch experiences. 2 of them were very up close. Okay, she's had 2 near-death experiences. Her second NDE was just unbelievable, was mind-blowing. Her NDE, where she talked about her consciousness of her being Dr. Melinda Greer was uploaded to like a central database. And then she joined the pod of like minds, of like souls. I'm just giving you just a very brief summary of her NDE. After her second NDE, she began to see deceased people in her hospital. I said, well, how do you know they were deceased people? Well, I saw the guy. He had a hospital gown on. He was pale as all hell. And all of a sudden, I yelling at him, what are you doing? You're supposed to be back in your room. What's your room? And then that individual, that ghost, went right through the elevator door, right through it. Okay. And she would have many examples like that. And she also has had out-of-body experiences. She's had missing time, like several experiences where she's had 2 or 3 hours of missing time.
Yeah.
Where she was driving, let's say, one time was her residency. Where you're doing a residency, and I know people do long shifts, in a residency after you finish the 4 years of medical school. But she was going to the residency, and she was with another doctor. Okay, and all of a sudden they wake up. It's like 6 hours later in another part of the town. Okay, so
Ray, let me. We have to go to the break here, and thank you so much again for jumping in. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. I want to get this last comment in from Ufi, who says, some say, quote, orbs are projections of remote viewers, and they can put energy or things into or pull them out of human bodies. This kind of reminds me a little bit of the movie Interstellar, where the ghost is actually, time traveler coming back in time. Oh, what's your take on that?
Again, to all of these things, no one has definitive answers. Because you cannot put these things into a laboratory and reduplicate them, like in a chemistry class. Okay, but the only thing you can go about is what experiencers are telling you. And a lot of people that do remote viewing, a lot of people that do astral travels and out of body experiences, they'll tell you that, look, I was there by your house last night. It said, not only were you on by my house, you were in my bedroom, and you were here on the right hand side, and you were looking at me. This is like another intuitive remote viewer,
exactly,
these things. And so they both start laughing that, yes, that's correct, So, but the person will say, look, I didn't see you as a ghost or a spirit energy. I saw an orb. Okay. So these are things that, you can use to try to put hypotheses together. But at this point, no one is researching these things,
Maybe is it possible we could never know, like you said, living in a dimension where we're relying on our 5 senses and the limitations of our instruments, that we're dealing, like you said, with consciousness, which has its own function. It doesn't need to abide by the scientific method per se, right? So do you think that we're limited, and the only way to find out is for the mind to become enlightened, or to move on to another level?
Well, I think it's a response, multifaceted response. One is that you can train yourself to have these altered states of consciousness experiences. One is through meditation. Some people do it through, taking DMT or mushrooms. Other people do it through meditation. Other people do it through learning how to do OBEs, like Monroe Institute, and Tom Campbell has been preaching for a very long time. So that's one way of doing it, for you to actually have these experiences. And via these experiences, you can learn about the nature of our reality. Another way...
You're blending both together, right? We've got to go.
Yeah.
But again, when is the next edition coming out?
Yeah, the book is titled A Greater Reality, and on my radio show, I'll be discussing more into details of that. It'll be published May 1st.
And that will be the new show on the new mainstream UNX. So go to the unxnetwork.com and we'll find out about Ray's show and so many other great podcasts and shows on that network. Ray, thank you so much again.
You're very welcome, Alan.
All right, everyone. So stay tuned. Do have that pre-recorded interview with Christina Gomez coming on the other side of this break. And I will hang with you until the very end when I pop back in. And of course, I'll be in the chat with you as well. I will see you on the inverted upside down. This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey y'all. Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UNX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us during that first hour with Ray Hernandez, a special guest indeed, jumping in at the last minute. Unfortunately, Reuben FastHorse did have a medical emergency, so please send him positive vibes his way. He could really use that. But as promised, my recorded interview with Christina Gomez is coming up in just a moment. I will hang with you in the chat until the end. I'll pop back in. We'll sign out as usual. And thank you all, for especially those who have followed over the years. Paranormal Now has jumped from platform to platform for quite some time. And, you know, it's just so nice to be here on the Paranormal Pop YouTube channel and to be a part of UNX Network as well. So as promised, here is my interview with Christina Gomez, host of Paradigm Shifts. Christina Gomez, age 22, became fascinated with the concept of alien life at a very young age. But it wasn't until high school that her interest became serious. She is in college now, studying for a BA degree in business and communication. She began her own YouTube channel to scrutinize public UFO sighting videos submitted to a variety of platforms. Using video software, she slowed down the footage, zoomed in, stabilized, and enhanced, then would post the results for others to study on her website and YouTube channel. After a year of UFO video analysis, Christina began a weekly show called Shifting the Paradigm, interviewing researchers, witnesses, and enthusiasts of the UFO topic and its many facets. Notable guests have joined Christina, such as Avi Loeb, Lou Elizondo, John Greenwald Jr., Sean Cahill, and Micah Hanks, among many others. The show grew in popularity, and Christina began a second weekly show called Mysteries of the History, examining cases and events from the topics of UFOs, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the extraordinary. In March of 2021, Christina began working with the team at The Debrief, producing video content featuring interviews with prominent figures in the UFO research community, such as Lou Elizondo and James Fox. She has also appeared on many talk shows and podcasts, such as Fade to Black, Radio with Jimmy Church, and the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold. Christina, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm so looking forward to this. And by the way, I love the background, the little purple light. So pretty.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's my color of choice these past couple of years. Pink, purple. I don't know why. I don't know where that's coming from. Shirts that I wear are purple, and it just makes me feel good. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a sign of the times. Like I need a little extra color in my life. But what about you? How did you get so wrapped up and involved in UFO research?
Well, I have to blame it on my dad. It's my dad's fault why I'm here today. He was a huge Twilight Zone fan, the TV show from the late 1950s, early 1960s. And, you know, I come from a generation where we grew up on TV. We grew up in having a cell phone in our hands as soon as we left the womb. Like that kind of sense of entertainment, but also placing our fingers in all the information that we can. It really affects your interests, what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to go ahead and pursue in your life. So even though that show is considered, I guess, old in today's standards, that's really what piqued my interest. For every single New Year's on the Sci-Fi Channel, they would play The Twilight Zone for 48 hours. So my dad and I would stay up, eat pizza and popcorn, and stay up as long as we could just to watch all of the shows. And while you're 5, 6, 7, you can only stay up for maybe a few hours. But as the years progress and we began to do it more often, I can say a lot of the shows by heart. Like you put it on and I know all the lines. So that's, for me, that is how it started. But there's a very big difference with just casually being interested in a topic and then really pursuing the topic. I feel like when you're a kid, that's where you can kind of get that little drive inside of you, that excitement. But when you get older and you really want to dedicate your time into it, that's where things change. And that's where your life will kind of take a different direction. So as soon as I had left home and I entered college, I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I was thinking, you know what, maybe I should really get into this topic for real. I don't know too much about it. I'm relatively new. Yes, I'm interested in UFOs. Yes, they're very cool, but I don't know the history. I don't know the science, and I most definitely don't know the politics. But what the heck? Let's go ahead and do it. And I've had the question, what the heck? Let's just go for it. And I've had the question multiple times when they're like, so what were your thoughts on the 2017 article? And I'm thinking, well, I was in high school. I was 17, so I knew nothing about it. It was like, what are you talking about? It wasn't until much later that I really had to catch up on all the things that happened from 2017 onward, along with all the history and the science aspects to it as well. So it's been a really long journey. It's only been, a year and a half for me doing this kind of research, but I'm so involved. I'm so interested. And I know that people from my generation are having the same questions that I am. It's not necessarily odd to consider people that are currently in college or in high school or even in middle school to question the fact that we're not alone in the universe. That's not even a question. But what I want to do is bring that foundation to people just like myself who want to know more but don't know where to look. And that's why I started my YouTube channel. When I had first done UFO analysis, I was kind of just getting my feet in the water, being like, okay, this is kind of cool. I don't want to hear this argument anymore of, oh, well, if aliens were real, how come all the pictures we have or all the videos are all fuzzy and blurry and blah, blah, blah. And then that argument gets old really, really fast. It gets really old. So I wanted to change that and really try to get my hands on all the footage that I could that didn't look CGI and go ahead and place it in my program, zoom it in, enhance it, place it back on YouTube, and allow people to make their own conclusions. I have a very stand back approach when it comes to this topic. I don't want to place my bias or my opinions in the information that I provide on my shows or even in these UFO analysis videos. I don't want to tell you what I think it is because that can go ahead and contaminate what the audience will go ahead and think. So that's kind of a very winded way of saying how I got interested in the topic, and I love every moment of it. I don't expect myself going away anytime soon.
So do you think there was a transition for you from the entertainment side of the interest to the, more legitimate study of the subject?
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. When it comes to your typical television shows, and now more than ever, we're getting a lot more UFO TV shows, like the one called UFO and the other one, I can't remember it now. And I feel, yeah, that one. Well, I think those shows are absolutely great for people that don't know anything about the topic, that don't know what happened in Roswell, that don't know what happened in these other cases like that happened in other parts of New Mexico or Arizona. So these are great primers of shows. Now, if you're going to go ahead and show these TV shows to people that are already interested in the topic, like, for example, UFO Twitter, I mean, it got a lot of hate. They're like, oh, these are so boring. Every single TV show talks about the same things. But the producers that are making these TV shows, they're not gearing it towards those that already know everything about the topic. Exactly. It's for those that know absolutely nothing. And I think that is great. We all need that foundation. We all started somewhere. No one knows everything, and no one will ever know everything. And I feel we need to have that sense of humility, but also to be humble that we're learning every single day in this topic. And I'm never going to go ahead and state, oh yeah, pay me a few $100, pay me $1,000, and I will tell you all of the secrets about the universe. So, there's a lot of new eyes on the topic now after all the media coverage that happened literally just last year. We had the preliminary report in June, and I feel that report brought this into a more mainstream conversation where it was being covered on the news, on podcasts by your average people at the grocery store, and they were like, did you hear about that report? Or what do you think about aliens? Or what do you think about this, that, and the other? And I feel when that preliminary report went and entered the public, when the mainstream media was covering it, there were a lot of people where their eyes were beginning to open to the topic. And that's when they came to our podcasts, they came to the TV shows, they came to the YouTube channels, because they were beginning to be hungry for more information that maybe the mainstream media wasn't really fulfilling for them. And that's our job, to fill in the gaps.
On the heels, so to speak, of the preliminary report in October, there was the UFO nukes conferences. Press conference with Robert Salas and hosted by Peter Robbins. And, I think the idea was that there's a momentum here. We need to do this because, it correlates to the concerns of the national defense. And so you would think that it would have gotten a lot more traction, right? I mean, great. I'm glad there was some press coverage because of it, but not nearly as much as I think it should have gotten. And I'm sure those who put this together would have expected to have come from it. Now, why do you think that is? There's this peak of interest. People are taking it legitimately. It has to do with national security. And suddenly we're saying, look, national security. And then it was like crickets for the most part.
You're right. And that's a really good observation. When it came to that kind of nuke conference, I feel like the news cycle kind of dictates people's interest. So while the preliminary report, which was being released by the government, was really exciting, maybe this nuke conference by people that might not be considered a part of the government anymore, and that's obviously not the case. We have Robert Salas that was a part of it, but because he's not maybe necessarily popular outside of our community, and this is just merely an assumption, maybe the mainstream media just didn't consider it to be interesting enough to go ahead and provide it to the public, because maybe it wasn't going to reach the clicks or the amount of revenue that it was hoping to do so. And after the report was released last year, we went from daily news interviews and coverage to crickets, just like you said. And then the news cycle jumps back into the other headlines. So I feel like maybe if that nuke conference was right when the report was released, I think it would have had a different outcome to doing it months after the report.
Since you started covering this, and retroactively from 2017 forward, what has stood out the most to you as the most significant step? Because we can say the report was a big deal, right? But there were a number of reportings that occurred leading up to that. Was there anything that really stuck out and you thought, wow, this is really changing?
Well, when it comes to the preliminary report, I feel like what was the most stunning was that only one case out of 144 were solved. For me, that's a smoking gun. That is a smoking gun right there. But no media picked up on it. Yes, our podcasts did in our community, but other than that, the majority of people, I don't know if they really caught on to the significance of that when the report dropped, that only one case out of 144 were solved. That's unbelievable. That is truly, like, I'm speechless that people aren't talking about that specific fact, and we have data to go ahead and say, well, we don't have enough data to answer the rest of these reports. Maybe it was the lack of time, we only had 6 months to do it, or maybe because we really don't know. And I feel like all of these factors, in a sense, it kind of makes it muddy water, but at the same time, it makes at least myself feel hungry to, okay, well, what are the rest? I want to know what happened to all of those cases. How come only one of them was solved? Now, since then, there have been a few other reports that have also been rather interesting. We've had some Congress people really pushing for kind of more UAP transparency, especially with the Gillibrand Amendment. But again, the mainstream media isn't really capturing on the fact. And I feel like if the mainstream media doesn't, the majority of people aren't going to catch on. Yes, there are a lot of people talking about it. There are a lot of UFO podcasts out there, but I feel like if you don't go ahead and push the first domino, the rest of the dominoes won't fall. No one's going to have this conversation if maybe the biggest people don't talk about it first, which is really disappointing. But it seems like that's kind of the fact at this point in time.
I think one of the most interesting parts of the report for me was the noting of the need to develop new means of investigation or analysis, because one of the critiques that we hear, particularly from the debunker skeptic, is that, well, maybe there's something wrong with the equipment. Maybe there was a fault. They switched the camera setting, right? And the fact is, if people actually go online and look it up, what they were looked into, right? The software that they were using, the FLIR, the equipment, they did look into it and they didn't find anything. Ergo, in the report, we may need to develop new means of investigation. And I think that's absolutely fascinating, because you're admitting to the fact that you've looked into it and you can't find an answer, and we're using all earthly means within the Air Force to investigate it as we would normally, assuming it's an Earth-made craft of our tech. And now we're left with our hands open, unanswered. So to me, that is extremely exciting to hear. I guess I still am skeptical that we'll actually get the funding to do that. But then at the same time, you have Avi Loeb and the Galileo project. So I think this is one of those situations for me, looking at the space race, right? You have NASA kind of dropping out. We're not making rockets anymore, or shuttles anymore. We're not going to space on our own. And then you have this big surge of the private industry coming up and filling that void. And I'm wondering if that's what we're going to see in the next 5 years, a real big push of private industry. Yeah, sure, it's university funded, his project as well. But those endeavors, I hope, take over the reins, because obviously, historically, we can't really rely on the government.
When it comes to private companies wanting to explore space, I just read an article rather recently talking about that even the car brand Toyota wants to go into space and put the very first car on the moon. That blew my mind. And I feel like just more and more companies, regardless of whatever they do, they really want to jump on this bandwagon of being the first in their field to go into space, and to have that little badge of like, I went to space, you better catch up. But also, if we didn't have that drive from these pretty big corporate companies, then these smaller companies simply won't follow. You need those that have the funding to do it, to get it started, and then everyone else can kind of go along and do their little holidays on the moon or on Mars, and who knows when that will be. Toyota said they want to go ahead and place the first car on the moon by the end of the decade. Honestly, that is not that far from now.
No,
that is
no.
not far, especially when we're seeing such quick advancements with Elon Musk, with Jeff Bezos, and even with NASA. I mean, NASA, the James Webb Space Telescope just made it to its destination at L2, and we'll start beginning to see the universe in infrared in the summertime. That is
so exciting.
Unbelievable. Like, I cannot wait. I am so excited to see what the James Webb Space Telescope is going to provide for us. What answers is it going to give us based off of these infrared photos? And Bill Nelson had mentioned with great enthusiasm that he truly believes that we're going to get some answers that even we didn't expect here on Earth. So I'm looking forward to what's going to happen. A lot is going on this practically golden age of the space race. And if it wasn't for these really, really big companies that were kind of starting this, nothing else would follow.
Perhaps we're moving into the platinum age of the space race. Because I certainly believe within our lifetime, it's quite feasible we will be sending humans to the nearest star system. I think it's quite possible. Because even if you put aside anti-gravity or warp technology, even just the physics that we understand now, we're getting closer to being able to create crafts that can go some percentage of the speed of light, and I'm sure there will be humans that'll say, fine, I'll give up 50 years of my life to go and do that, and I think that is extraordinary, and I think that's what makes us an amazing species. And like you said, you're right. It might take those big billionaires, the crazy billionaires. That's if that's what we have to work with, so be it. Because obviously, NASA and the government's not getting the push that it needs and the funding that it needs. I mean, tardigrades, it conceivably could be in the nearest planet. I think what Sirius B in 20 years from now, 10 years from now, something like that. They're going to do like these little solar, I forget what it's called now, but they're like little solar sails. And they're basically be like shooting little lasers at it and pushing it along, and it can be there in like 10 years. That's crazy.
It is. I'll be honest with you. I first learned about tardigrades from Star Trek Discovery. They were talking about it in the show, from how they get from point A to point B. Well, actually, how they ended up going to point A to point B was using tardigrades. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that? And then when I had looked into it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. Like the fact that we're able to see something so microscopic and go ahead and believe for it to be evidence of life, and then how to harbor that as well. So I feel like through television, through the media, you're able to kind of learn things that maybe you didn't expect you can actually learn. And parents or even some adults are like, oh, don't spend too much time watching television. It's bad for your brain. It'll make it melt. But depending on what you watch, even if it's like an entertainment TV show, a lot of times they add a lot of facts. They add a lot of information that you can really learn, or that can go ahead and spark your interest to get started on a path that maybe you didn't expect taking just a few months ago, a year ago.
Yeah. It's a good question. We've been hearing that forever, right? Like my parents, their generation, their parents were saying, don't watch too much TV. It's going to rot your brain. I think there is some truth to that with some people, depending, but that's a choice, right? How much time do you spend doing, whatever? How are you raised? But I think now we're hearing the same thing with the virtual reality and the metaverse and social media. We've been hearing that for years. And I don't think it's the end of the human race. I don't think we have to worry about that. I don't think that we're going to make ourselves so dumb that society is going to collapse. There are problems with it, but so what do you think the future is in that world? I mean, is it a negative to have more engagement in the virtual reality, like the observation deck? I went to the Travis Walton Fire Sky Summit there, and it was so fun. It was totally virtual reality, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the idea of going in out of different rooms, and it felt more social than just typing a text in a comment box on Facebook.
I feel like it's really up to free will. It's up to what you really want with your life, because virtual reality is pretty darn amazing. And it can go one of two ways. You can use it in a negative way, which I'm not going to go into detail, or you can use it in a positive way to go ahead and attempt to understand the places of how the moon looks, or how Mars looks, or what under the ocean, and to see all these creatures that maybe you couldn't see in an aquarium, and you can actually swim with them and learn. The same with the internet. You can have kids that can watch TikToks all day on cat videos. You learn nothing, but it's very entertaining. Don't get me wrong, I love cat videos. Or you can give it to a kid who maybe has a stronger willpower and say, you know what, actually, I want to understand how quantum mechanics works. I want to understand the concept of black holes. Let me look at a version for kids to understand, and then I can go from there. So
Yeah.
It really goes one of two ways. And it's all towards free will, but also how you're raised, who you grow up with. Do the other people that you're with kind of have the same mentality as you, or have the same willpower as you? So how we react to our environment, how we react to our society is incredibly crucial. It is. But I'm taking this class in university, and it's about nonverbal communication. And I love it. It's one of my favorite classes I've ever taken ever in the university, because I'm not. Anyways, and what I learned from this course was that kids that watch about 10 hours of television a day, especially during these times of COVID, right, where there's all this lockdown stuff, they have a better understanding of human emotion, of how to go ahead and project that emotion, that maybe someone who doesn't watch that much television, maybe someone who doesn't have that much interaction with people cannot catch on. These kids that watch that much television can tell when someone is lying, because these actors really have to try and place these little like characteristics, kind of like a twitch in the eyebrow, or like their hand gestures, to go ahead and prove the fact that they're lying. Plus you'll have the little music in the background that'll kind of give the audience that hint. But if those kids didn't watch that, they wouldn't catch on to the basic human interactions. And I found that really fascinating, because it goes back into that argument, well, if you watch too much TV, your brains are going to melt. But at the same time, you can learn a lot from it. It's just having that balance.
Yeah, it can actually be humanizing. It sounds like what you're saying to me.
Now, when it comes to virtual reality, I've never used it before. I would be pretty excited too. That sounds like a lot of fun to go ahead and explore. I don't know, whatever option it gives me. I don't know at all how it works. I don't know how you get the picture things. Makes me feel like I'm really old, but I'm not. But I feel like, again, we can learn a lot from it, but I feel like it's just based on of who our parents are, who our friends are, and how we'll use that technology, either in a negative way or in a positive way.
How do we use technology to our advantage, better to our advantage, to get the word out about the legitimate study and the phenomena of the UFO and UAP phenomena?
That's a good one.
Do we just keep doing this? I mean, this works, and I know we reach people, but what else?
I think if we're ever able to get that opportunity to be invited to these, pretty big media outlets, we've heard Jeremy Corbell, we've had George Knapp, we've had Lou Elizondo talk on these really big outlets such as CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all these acronyms. I feel like that's a really great start, but the people that are doing these programs need to have that open mind to go ahead and say, you know what, I want to interview this person for 10 minutes to talk about this, that, and the other. And then when you go from there, everything else kind of opens up. But the most important thing is trying to push our government for that transparency to get all that information. If we didn't do the pushes that we have done in the last, year and a half, I don't think we would have gotten the Gillibrand Amendment at this point in time. I don't think we would have gotten the UAP preliminary report at this point in time, the time that we did, if we didn't push for it, if we didn't have people on television, if we didn't have all the podcasts that we did, if we didn't have the Big Phone Home run by Luis Jimenez. If those things didn't happen, the rest wouldn't have happened, what we have today. So I feel like it's, as we've heard the saying goes, it's a marathon and not a sprint. We're not going to see something happen overnight unless we get some kind of mass disclosure of some sort. We see a craft come down and be like, hey guys. But other than that, which I think is pretty extreme, it's going to take time. But we've come a long way, truly, in a short period of time that I did not expect.
I think that the "hey guys" theory is not going to come to fruition.
Not anytime soon.
Well, what comes up on the program a lot, and Coffee and UFOs as well, is what's going on with the experiencer, right? So if an experiencer is having this alleged alien contact, right, CE3, CE4, and these beings are telling them who they are or why they're here, or maybe not, but there's this interaction that's very real for them. And sometimes, there are cases like Debbie Jordan Cauble, who one of the nights she remembers being abducted, she had people in her neighborhood that witnessed a UFO over her house. So that really helps kind of corroborate her story. If they're being told things, why would they communicate to the individual, and why not speak to the masses of people? Why not really make it known? Like, what's the deal there?
It's a really difficult thing to answer, and it's not something that I'm very knowledgeable in. I haven't jumped into the contactee experiencer aspect of the UFO phenomenon yet, just because it's very anecdotal. There's very little evidence to go ahead and prove the fact that these things happen to these people. Now, I'm not stating that these things didn't happen, but it is difficult to go ahead and convince the public with just a story. And while that might sound really heartbreaking, it kind of is just the current fact at this point in time. So when it comes to contactees, for me, I'll always listen and I'll always be an ear, but to go ahead and base my opinion or my my viewpoint on the UFO phenomenon based just on a story is rather difficult. I need that evidence. I'm very scientifically minded. I'm very nuts and bolts. So it's a hard one. It really, really is. But there are some really fantastic stories that are rather famous. Like you have the Travis Walton case, like you had mentioned. There's Whitley Strieber, where these people have written books, that have written movies, have even evidence to go ahead and say, well, I have this in my arm, or I remember this, and I had these people that were with me. So it's, and I'm kind of lost for words. I just find it very difficult.
Well, it is, and that's why we talk about it, because we're trying to figure this thing out. Right. And so, is it fair to say that you're not necessarily a believer, but you in the alien abduction experience, and that you're open-minded to it?
I'm very open-minded to it. We can't place all of our eggs in one basket. There have been a lot of stories where people have stated, I've been abducted by aliens, and then they come out later saying, oh no, it's just a hoax, I'm just kidding. And that person ruins it for everyone. That one person just contaminates the entire pool, where now you question, are all alien abductions a lie just because one person wanted to make fun of it? it's because of those very few people that have ruined it for everyone. Now we all need to remain skeptical on the information that is given to us, regardless if that's an abduction case, a science base, a science story, or one that's a historical account that have a lot of witnesses. We always need to remain skeptical, and we can't believe everything that we're told. We have to make up our own opinions based off of our previous experiences, but also from the information that we can really attempt to state, okay, well, now there's data to back this up. But being a believer, it's like faith. And I see many groups which seem more like religious groups with fantastical anecdotal information. And I can't promote or invest into that. I have to think of my young subscribers that don't know anything about the topic yet, at least.
So you think there's obviously a sense of responsibility on your part?
I think yes, I do. I feel like with whatever information that I collect and that I provide to my audience, I need to be responsible in the sense for it of not placing my bias or not my opinion and all the information that I collect, even if I might consider it to be disinformation or the truth, placing it all out there so that people can make their own conclusions on what they think it is. I'm not here to tell people, you need to believe this and you need to believe that. It's just kind of more of, I want you to go on this journey on your own, figure it out for yourself. I will help you along the way. But I don't want people to call me and say, well, Christina Gomez, she is the gospel. Whatever she says is the truth. Like, I don't want that. No, absolutely not. Because I'm also on this journey. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't know. And I'm learning every single day. And what I might say today, what my opinion might be today, it's going to change tomorrow based off the more information that I get a hold of.
Right. I've certainly shifted over the years in what I choose to believe in, and I say choose to believe because that with circumstantial evidence, with just the first person account and nothing else to support it, it is a choosing to believe, right? Because like you said, like certain things you just can't prove it without a shadow of a doubt. And I think the strongest case out there is probably one of two: Travis Walton case or the Socorro, New Mexico case with Lonnie Zamora. But Travis Walton, we have people, fortunately, over the decades, who have been steadfast in their story. We have documentation through reporting. We have local police and investigations going on site. We have had people attempt to debunk it a million times and then fail all the time along the way. And so for me, that is a really good case. Like, so if there's one alien abduction case that you would believe in, for you, what would it be? We'll say hypothetically.
I think based off the information that you just provided, the Travis Walton case would be one where it would be more difficult to go ahead and debunk based off of all the people that have already tried and failed. Yes, Travis had failed one of the polygraph tests and then passed the rest of them, and that kind of left people kind of wibbly wobbly on his stance. But from my understanding, from the research that I did, based off of what he had stated, he said that he was kind of placed into a corner, and you can really only answer yes/no questions on a polygraph test. You can't really give an explanation. And I think also nerves had a reaction to the polygraph test as well. Now, I've never taken one, so I don't know too much about it in that regard. But I feel like based off of all of the famous stories so far that we have seen, I feel like the Travis Walton case is a little bit more difficult to go to debunk at this point in time.
Sure. And if I'm understanding correctly, the one event, the one time he failed a polygraph test was for a game show.
Yes.
And it's based purely on entertainment. We've all learned from reality television that it's not reality television. And, even the people in reality television will put on a little bit of an entertainment for you to spice it up. And so I think that totally delegitimizes it in the first place. And then there is the very fact that a lot of precincts and courts won't accept the polygraph test in the United States. They won't accept it as evidence. because there's a lot of inconsistency, and it's not an exact science. Now, with Travis's case, so if you take 5 tests now and fail only one of them and pass the other 4, maybe in that case you can make the argument that on average, after you do a certain number of polygraph tests, if you pass a certain number of them, then you can say he was lying or not. I've looked into that. I haven't seen any papers on that. So I personally, I don't put a lot of stock into polygraph tests, but I do think that it could be supplemental towards someone's story. So growing up, I had a similar experience. My mom and I watched X-Files together a lot. We watched shows like Sightings, and so for me, there was always that kind of just emotional connection to the enjoyment of entertaining these ideas. And I wonder for you, do you have an emotional investment in this? Like, is it fun? Does it give you a thrill? Or is it really just hardcore nuts and bolts, and you just want to cold case file this, take it out of the cold case and crack it and just stick to the facts?
For me, I think it's the most important conversation that humanity is having at this point in time. So being kind of more in the cold aspect of really just trying to understand the topic is kind of where I'm standing. But see, I don't invest in a worldview where abductees, contactees, and experience stories kind of mold my mind. I have come across many stories where people end up claiming they have exclusivity with contacting aliens, so that they are like star seeds and etc. And well, that's great, but they can't prove it. So as Lou Elizondo says, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, also what Carl Sagan said. And I prefer to deal with the aspects of this mystery where there is more hands-on data. But that's just me. That's my platform. That's what I do. And there are many platforms out there where if you want to believe those things, you can get your fill of stories and stuff. There are so many different platforms that cover this topic with their own little spice to it, that if you not you, but if whoever doesn't agree with me, they can go to someone else who talks about the same thing, but in a different aspect, maybe in a more of one side versus the other. But for me, it's very more hands-on data that I can grab onto versus just stories.
So it's not necessarily something that you need for fulfillment, or spiritual, or just
I don't think so. I mean, as for an emotional hook, I believe in my lifetime, we as a species are going to jump out into the solar system. And I want to find out if we really are being visited.
I just had an image of a bunch of us just holding hands and jumping out into the solar system.
Let's go.
I just see the animation now. Yeah, but you know what? Okay, so here's the thing, though, right? Because in the 1950s, especially, and into the 60s, there was that, Venus brother, alien brother that was going to save us and take us off the planet, or save the planet and bring us into the cosmic, social life, and we're going to expand our consciousness, and it didn't happen, and here we are. And is there when I hear you say that, and that's no different than an atheist studying the cosmos in any number of ways, there is still, to my ears, a metaphysical underpinning to that search, to the idea of us kind of going out into the greater universe. Is that would you agree with that as being a part of how you think, or is it good for us, for humanity? Do you think there's something positive that would come out of that movement?
At this point in time, I believe it's inevitable. We are explorers, we are adventurers, but we humans our civilization, if we don't destroy ourselves, that's going to be our definite path to go ahead and explore our solar system and explore our universe. So could we have one day full open contact? Well, could that accelerate our growth and advancement? I think it would. Exploring, being curious, being adventurers, it's in our genetics. We are not going to stay earthbound forever. And I think in my lifetime that we're going to go ahead and truly explore our universe.
Yeah, I'm with you. Obviously, we'll be on Mars fairly soon. I think that's possible. I know there are those that are naysayers and telling Elon Musk, well, it's not really going to work the way you think it is. But people have been telling Elon Musk that for a long time. And again, people like that are forward thinking and they defy conventionality and what would be otherwise considered common sense thinking. For me, I think that there is sort of an existential crisis going on, and you might be right. I mean, maybe that is how we save ourselves as a species, is to go out there. And I suppose the first step is Mars and surely the moon to some degree. But how realistic is it that we can really sort of go off world and populate other worlds? And what's the survivability factor?
Well, it's becoming higher and higher almost every single day. We're having astronomers look at Ganymede, which has an ocean below it. We have Mimas, which is a rather new discovery that also it's not frozen solid, but it might actually have liquid water. Then we even have the polar caps on the moon might also have water as well.
Yep.
And then we've even heard Mars that it still potentially might have water, or at least molecules of evidence of it once having water. And as we know, water is life. So if there's water, that means there is life. And it could very well mean that if we do go just venture in our solar system, which is really, really close compared to the scheme of our universe, it's plausible that surviving is growing every single day the more research that we do with just these nearby moons. And commercialism will probably drive colonization. Sadly, I mean, the resources of the asteroids, the precious metals, I see it being much like what is depicted in the TV show The Expanse. I really do.
I have not seen The Expanse.
Okay, well,
is it a must-see?
I feel like in this field that we're in, especially looking at the science aspect to it, yes, I believe it is a must-see because it puts some things into perspective that, you know what, maybe it is possible. And it's very believable in the way that they express the storyline.
When you're looking at just the documentation records by the government, FOIA released records, if you take away all the UFO videos that you've looked at, alleged UFOs, craft, what have you, eliminate all that. And if you're just looking at the paper trail, what does that tell you, and how convincing is it to you that indeed we've captured a UFO, perhaps at Roswell, or the government's aware of otherworldly craft visiting Earth?
So, to my knowledge, based off the FOIA reports that I have read so far, there hasn't been any documentation of the government capturing an alien, at least to my knowledge, and I could be wrong. But so far, I haven't seen that. Now, when it comes to the paper trail of the government being interested in the topic, yeah, that one is pretty long. It's not necessarily really a secret anymore. And the best place to look is the Black Vault run by John Greenwald Jr., who has all the FOIA reports right on his website. So it's very easy to go ahead and look. Here's the interesting thing about FOIA reports in general. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to find it. The wording is very particular. And I feel like for someone that, or even for younger people that might not really understand how the wording works, especially when working with the government or anything legal, it can be kind of overwhelming. You're reading a lot of words, but you're not really comprehending what it's saying. And I feel like, I'm not saying that all FOIA reports are like that. There are some that are pretty easy to go ahead and read, but then there are some that I feel that are more dense, that might have a lot more information, but that are more difficult to comprehend, at least for those that, again, don't really know what they're looking for. But I suspect, for what I've seen, that there is a lot more hidden away classified information, but I also wonder how much of those secrets is in the corporate realm rather than the government realm. And I've had this conversation before. So there's no obligation of a third part contractor to do the DoD with their research or what they are doing to release the info to the public. So it makes you question who really has more power when it comes to the aspect of the UFO phenomenon, when it comes to the aspect of secrets. Is it the corporate realm or is it the governmental realm?
Right. It's like for every one piece of paper you find in the FOIA releases, perhaps there's cabinets in private hands.
And we'll never get a hold of that. There's nothing that we can do for the public to get that paperwork from these corporate realms. It's practically, to my knowledge at this point in time, it's practically impossible.
Do you think that the Pentagon, we'll say in general, whatever agencies are aware of the UFO phenomena, are they trying to extricate themselves? Is that what we're seeing now? This process of little by little kind of easing out, and slowly admitting without stepping in it, without getting themselves in trouble. Like, oh, we lied to you straight face for so long. Are we seeing that right now?
I think we're seeing a new generation of staffers. That's what I think. And we've had people talk about there's this slow drip, there's this, what kind of what you said, but the information is compartmentalized. And from my understanding, this is just merely an opinion, I really do feel like we're getting a new generation of staffers that truly want to know what's going on and that they want the public to know what's going on, versus you're having these old geezers, right, in the Pentagon or wherever you want to call them, who can sit on these stories until they pass on. And then that's it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, now I guess I could just pass this on to the next generation. And then these new people that are coming in are really getting hungry for this information. Now they're beginning to realize that it's not being laughed at, that it's not ridiculed like it used to be just a few decades ago. Like, honestly, not that long ago. But now people are having this different viewpoint on it, where we can have this conversation and not be laughed at, not be placed in a loony bin or something, but we're taken seriously. And I think these new staff members are beginning to realize that as well.
Earlier, you had alluded to this as well, that there's this laugh factor, right? And sometimes someone comes out, whether it should be charlatan or just a mistake, making a claim, it turns out to not be true, and it's a black eye in the community of UFO research. I think that's kind of unfair. I understand culturally how we got there, but for instance, there are millions of people that will look at something from Egyptian hieroglyphics or ancient cultures and extrapolate their own metaphysical interpretations as to what it means in spirituality or aliens visiting Earth. But no one looks at Egyptologists and say, y'all got to stop. You're creating all these crazy people out here with these crazy ideas, right? So we kind of need to get to that place where it's like, even if you have really fringe ideas, and there are people out there making false claims, that people can still ignore that and focus on, the more conservative work, like that you're focused on. That's where I think we need to get. I guess the question is like, how do we get there? Other than just, again, doing what you're doing.
I'm not.
Or is it a generational thing?
I think it's a generational thing. I really do. Again, from what I had said at almost the beginning, it's right now, my generation, those that are in high school, those that are in middle school, it's not a question that we are not alone in the universe. It's without a doubt that there are other beings out there, that there are other sources of life, vegetation, microbial life out there in the universe. But it's really getting our hands on the information that goes ahead and backs up those claims, the history, the science, the nuts and bolts aspect. So for me, I think that as time progresses, as more people come into the earth and they're being exposed to this, that's what's probably going to change that aspect of ridicule or of shrug of the shoulders to a more of a sense of interest. That's my opinion on that right now.
Okay. Besides UFOs and extraterrestrials, do you have any other paranormal interests at all?
I like them all. You know,
Yeah.
when I was growing up, and even to this day, I've always really enjoyed reading legends and folklore of all different parts of the world. So yeah, I'm not saying that I'm knowledgeable on them, but I've always enjoyed it. Like fairies, dragons, chupacabra, you know, all of these things. They've all been very, very interesting. And from when I was very small, I always told my dad, I was like, you know, I think that some of these beings are real. There's no way that the human imagination is that vast to create these creatures that maybe they've never seen before. How can you imagine something that you've never seen? It's like inventing a new color. You can't do that until you see one for the first time. So when it comes to these like myths and legends and cryptids, I believe that they're all possible, all of them. But it's really getting that evidence to back up those claims. But like I'm smiling because like my inner child gets so excited to just consider these kinds of like quote unquote monsters being real, and yet so many people haven't seen them. They're so deep in the forest and parts that are uninhabited, and they're living a somewhat peaceful life, and us humans know nothing about it.
See, and that's what I'm talking about. See, there's joy in entertaining these ideas.
When it comes to cryptids, I think it does bring that sense of joy, but I don't find it the sense of importance as the extraterrestrial life that lives outside of our universe, that could also even be visiting us here on Earth. When it comes, I think that is what's really important, what can help us move forward, which can help us kind of get that advancement in technology that maybe that these little fun cryptids might not be able to. So how do people know what claims are true and what claims are false? You know, beliefs focus one's like beliefs focus on one's like existing paradigm, and so much of what we read, watch, listen to is narrative driven by parties with investments, whether mainstream media or Hollywood, as we've seen before. And there is this whole like factor where one likes to believe and so on. So there's a lot of digging to do through historical data with which many in many respects ignore because they want constant answers on any topics: ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, other dimensions. So things like this, I feel like we need to dig more into the historical data, which many people are ignoring, and getting those instant answers.
A two-part question. Are there any cases that you think need to get more attention? And why is it? Because I have discussions with people in this field all the time. They're approached by a production company, and they want to do these 5 cases that have been done 1,000 times before, you know, on every station, every documentary. Why are we struggling to crack open new cases, look at other cases other than the top 5 or 6 that are out there? And like, what is for you should be in that category of a new case study, or just not a new case study, but a case that needs more focus?
Well, those media outlets that are kind of focusing on those 5 cases, they already know that they do so well. They already have so much public interest. So why go and extend outside of that perfect formula that works so great for television, for that entertainment? Why place yourself in a boat without a paddle, right? And do that experiment. It can be dangerous. It can be really costly. So a lot of these media outlets, these TV shows, just kind of stick to the 5 just to be safe because they know they're going to get some pretty good revenue. Now, when you're doing newer stories, it can be tricky because maybe there's not enough information. Maybe there's not enough witnesses, not enough people that are interested in that topic. There are quite a few explanations. One of my current favorite stories when it comes to the UFO topic, which is one that's been like pretty well researched, at least not here in the United States, but in Brazil, is the Kolaris Brazil incident in the 1970s. That one is my favorite. And for those that don't know the story, I'll just really briefly go over it. And what happened was, it was actually a UFO flap. So for 6 months, this small town in Kolaris, which is a fishing town right near the top of, like, kind of the side top of Brazil, where they were being practically terrorized by UFOs every single night for 6 months. And this is one of the very, very, very few stories where I've actually heard these beings hurting humans, hurting people, in the sense where they'd have beams of light that would come down and shine on someone, and it would pierce needles in their body, on their chest or on their throat area, on their thighs. And there's pictures to go ahead and show the data behind this. And later on, after a few months, the people were getting so terrified, they asked the mayor to get it fixed. They're like, look, we want to be protected. How can you protect us? So the mayor called the capital and said, look, I want you to send your military officials to protect my civilians, my citizens. And what the people were expecting for these military officials to bring in from Brazil was going to be like guns and helicopters and weapons. But instead, what these officials brought were paper, pencils, cameras, and that's it. That's all they brought. Those were their weapons. So instead of protecting the civilians, they were just documenting what was happening. And it's a pretty in-depth story. I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's a really fascinating one. It's one of my all-time favorites. And there's about 4,000 or 5,000 witnesses. A lot of them have been documented. You can find the FOIA reports on the Black Vault. And I feel like that one needs a lot more attention, just because that kind of setting is so rare, where you're having a flap for 6 months. Usually it's maybe 2 days, or like very sparsely throughout several years or a century, if that. But this one was consistently every single day for 6 months. People have evidence, physical evidence on their bodies of these piercing marks. And you even had the general of the project, called Operación Plato, who right before he had passed away told the story of what happened to them, what happened to his crew while they were there in Kolaris, Brazil, and where he had his own encounter as well. And what's very interesting about his story is that he has no reason to lie. He was the main guy of the project. If anything, he should have died with that secret if anything really did happen to him. But instead, he went out and he told these 2 UFO researchers at the time in Brazil, in I think 2000, in the early 2000s, and he went ahead and told the story. About a month later, he allegedly committed suicide.
I would say another case is the Stephenville Ufo Case of 2008. Again, that was a flap that lasted, I think, a good 6 months, pretty close. And there was a lot of good eyewitness coverage there, and you have radar tracking, and so there is a good case to be made, that we were visited by extraterrestrials that night, and many nights since then. I mean, it's kind of hard to look up into the sky and confuse a dirigible with a metallic bottom of a craft that is the size of more than 1 football field. There's misperception, and then there's I know what I saw, that's one of those cases that I think we need to spend a lot more time covering. Christina, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, where do people go to find out more about you and your shows?
Well, I place most of my updates on Twitter at eyes_on the skies. But if you want to find my channel either on YouTube or on other podcast platforms, you can just type in Christina Gomez or Paradigm Shifts, as it is shown on the bottom, and you can catch up on all of the shows right there.
All right. Thanks so much, Christina. And if you can leave us with one thought, what would it be?
Keep your eyes on the skies.
All right, that's my interview with Christina Gomez. Thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for everyone in chat for hanging with me for the 2 hours. I will keep you updated on Reuben's state and his health in the next week or so. As always, if you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below. If you're a podcast listener, please write a review, rate the podcast. It would be super helpful. Thank you all so much. And as always, peace and love, and live in the mystery.